What's up, guys? Welcome to my channel. In this video we're going to learn JUnit with Mockito. Okay, all right, so let's get started. As always, we will show you how what are the dependencies or the libraries that we need. Okay, for JUnit, since this is a Spring Boot application, we only need to add this library, Spring Boot Starter Test. When you add this library, you will get all the necessary libraries for JUnit, including the Mockito. Let me show you the libraries. Yeah, you will get all these libraries. Okay, this will be available. This will be accessible to you once you add this dependency, right? And all these are the only libraries we need for JUnit. Okay. All right. Then the other library, this one is not necessary, but in this demo, we're going to test controller, so we need to add this. And also this is how you call this? This is a database driver. So since this is a JUnit, we are going to use the memory DB, which is H2. So we will use this, but of course in real world we're not going to we're not going to use this in actual production environment, right? We normally use other RDBMS, right? Like Oracle, SQL Server, stuff like that, right? But for JUnit, this we normally use H2 database, okay? Because we only need to test it in our local, in memory particularly. Okay, then also, of course, we need the library for Spring Data, which is Spring Boot Starter Data, JPA. And of course, for simplicity of the code, we don't want to create get and setter methods, so we use Lombok. All right. Yeah, this so basically these are the library or the dependencies that we need for this demo. All right, then let's go to our configuration. By the way, the scope of this demo is for JUnit only, right? So I will not discuss here the service and the repo or the controller. Okay, we will focus on how to test them. Okay, so let's start with the our application properties configuration for our tests, JUnit tests. So here in our application properties, we will configure the H2 database. So we will be needing this. We will need to configure our data source with the details for H2 database. So this is the URL, the data source URL for HT2DB. Okay, this is the driver and the credentials and the dialect. Okay, so we will use update because we want the framework to create the tables automatically at first. Okay, so all right, so let's first let us test the controller. For controller, we have two ways to test it. We can either use map MVC or REST template test. This one, test REST template. Okay, so let me show you how to do it in using Mac MVC. Okay, by the way, the Mac MVC is under this package, Spring Framework Test Web Servlet. Yeah, this package basically. Then for test REST template, test REST template, it's under which package? Let me say. Yeah, it's under web client package, Spring Framework boot test web client. All right, anyway, let me show you first the Mac MVC, how to do it. For Mac MVC, there is a perform method to call the endpoint. This is our endpoint. In our controller, we have test1 endpoint. Let me show it to you. So this is our controller, this is our test1 endpoint. So we're going to test this. This controller will return a simple dummy data test1. Okay, so whatever the result of this test key, we don't care about that. So we will test this endpoint test1, and we expect this dummy string. Okay, so let me try this one. Okay, so again, we for mock MVC, there is a method called perform to call the controller endpoint, which is test1 in our case. Then we have this method. This is part of the framework get. Yeah, this one get. Basically, we will use this method to call the controller endpoint that we want to test. Then of course after that, we can do some lag. We can use the and do then print to display the lag. Okay, whatever the result of the request and response will be lag, if we call this. Then we can call also the and expect to evaluate the result of this. Once after we call this, it will return some response and response code, right? So we can check that what we can verify that the status is okay. Normally this is 200, right? Anyway, yeah, this is 200. Okay, it's 200 if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, it's 200. All right, so let me go back. So we expect the status is 200. If it's not 200, this line will basically fail. It will not pass. Okay, then another expectation is the content. The content contains string test1, as I showed you earlier. This one, it has test1. Okay, if the content does not have this, meaning it fails. So again, this particular test case will fail. Okay, so for this to pass, we should be getting this endpoint should return 200 status. Okay, HTTP status should be 200. Then the content should contain test1. Okay, let me run this. Let me double confirm if it will pass or not. Alright, I think it's okay. It's pass. Yeah, it's pass. You see, as you can see here, let me show you the lag. See, this is the request. The request contains the endpoint test1. Okay, and this is the, let me show you the response. Yeah, this is the response. Yeah, the body contains test1, and the whatever we put in our test here, because test key is sorry, not this one, this one. Yeah, the test key contains environment test env, so it will pull whatever we set here. Okay, so yeah, so it's successful, right? Test1 does whatever the environment here, because that's the logic in our, that's what we have here. All right, so let's try the other approach to test the controller. We have here another way, another approach. We will, for this one, we will call the test less template instead of mock MVC. For test less template, we will be needing, because we will, you see the difference in mock MVC, we don't need to specify the base, how you call this, URL or URI. Okay, and for we only, the mock MVC is much simpler, because we only pass the endpoint itself. We don't care about the port or the host, yeah, of the URL. Okay, but for this demo, I will show you another approach, because yeah, there are some requirements that we need to test based on the requirements, right? So this is another alternative when we want to test also the host and the port. Okay, actually in this case, the port is a randomly generated by our framework, Spring Boot test framework. Okay, that's why we have here random port. We need to specify the web environment. We need to pass this. As you can see in the Mac MVC, we simply have the Spring Boot test and auto configure Mac MVC annotation, right? But in REST template, we do not have this auto configure Mac MVC. All right, we only have Spring Boot test, but we need to pass the web environment parameter, which is this. This is the value we want. It will generate a random port. Okay. Then to retrieve whatever the port that we need to use local server port. Okay, to assign that value, the port, to this variable, right? That's why we need this. First, we need the environment to tell the framework we need a random port. Then we need to declare a variable to get that port. Okay. All right. So then this is the API, the REST template that we're going to use to test our controller. As you can see here, this is the REST template. There's a method called get for object to test the REST template use to test the endpoint using get method. We use this method, get for object. But for example, we want to test the endpoint using post method. A post method, we use this post for entity, right? Then we just pass since we are testing the local only, so we use local host. But for example, you want to test, there is a SIT environment that you want to test. You can specify here the IP address of that SIT environment. Okay. Then of course the port, as I said, you can since this is local, I use the how you call this web environment port. But I think you can replace this. For example, you have a non-local environment that you want to test. I think you can replace this part, the actual IP of the, for example, SIT and the actual port. But since this is local, I use this web environment. Basically this web environment parameter and this local server port to get that particular local port. All right. So let's test this. First, here we have two endpoint to test: the get endpoint and the post method. Get method endpoint and the post method endpoint. All right. Let's test first the get HTTP method. Alright, so it's successful. Let me show you the content for, as I actually I already showed earlier. For test 1, we return the controller endpoint, return test 1. Then for test 2, it will return test 2 dummy. Okay, let me show it to you. So this is the endpoint test 1, right? Returns test 1. I make it simple so you can easily test. Then for test 2, I return test 2. Right. That's why in our JUnit test, we check the result when we call this particular endpoint. For test 1, it will return test 1. For test 2, it will return test 2. Alright, so yeah, so the same test 1 and test 2, basically we just it's the same. We just pass the URL include the URL include the host and port plus the endpoint. Okay, the only difference between the two, this one is using HTTP get HTTP method. The other one is using post HTTP method. Okay, so let's verify these two methods. I will run this one, and we should expect a pass for these two methods. Okay, we can even put a break to double confirm. All right, so here and here. All right, let me run this. So here we have assert that. So the result of this endpoint should contain test 1. Okay, let me resume. All right, so see, it passed. Test 1 is passed. Now we are testing the second endpoint, test 2. Again, we expect the result should contain test 2, this one, right? So let's assume. All right, so both test cases pass, test 1 and test 2. All right, so after testing the controller, let me test our query. So, because sometimes we want to double confirm if our SQL is working or not, right? But in this demo, I will show you, because the focus is on the testing, so I will not give you a complicated query. Because here I will just use the generic JPA, right, where we store record to DB, and we retrieve record from DB. Then again, this is we're using H2, right? So all this data that we're testing is only in the memory, right? Because we are using in-memory DB H2. Okay, so here in our SQL query test, here I will insert a record. I will save a record in our H2 database, this one, customer. Then I will, after saving it, I will retrieve using this find all. Then whatever the result, I will verify if the result should be the same with what we saved, right? That's why I have here assert true. Then the same, I will verify if the content of the result is having these values. Okay, so let me let me test this one, run this. Let me verify whether it's working or not. So again, this test is we will test whether our repository API is working or not, right? That's why we save the record in our H2 database. Then after saving it, we pull whatever we saved. Then here we validate whether we get the correct value or not. Okay, so let me resume. All right, so test 1 pass. All right, so what else? So this one, we test our repository or our how you call it, our JPA APIs. Okay, so it's working. Now let's move to our service. In our service, as you can see in our previous test cases, we use Spring Boot test annotation, right? Then for Mac MVC, we have this extra auto configure Mac MVC. Then for the same with REST template, we also use Spring Boot test, but this time we use web environment parameter. All right. Then for the repository API, we simply use Spring Boot test. Okay, but for the service, as you can see, instead of using at Spring Boot test, we use extend with, right? As much as possible, if we can use this extend with, uh, always use this instead of at Spring Boot test, because this one is very heavy. It will load all the resources, all your classes here, even though you don't need to test. That's why this one is very expensive. If you can avoid to use this, avoid using this. So here in our, as you can see here, I use this because this repo, we cannot, it has a lot of dependency, right? Like the data source and stuff. So we have no choice but to use this. The same with others, with the, this Spring Boot, how you call this Mac MVC, because this is a Spring. It basically depends on Spring framework. That's why we have to use this also. But this time for this service, we can simply use extend with Spring extension. Okay, this one is light only. All right, so for this one, we are going to test the service, the logic of this. That's why we to instantiate this, we use the annotation at inject max to create an instance of this. This is the one we are going to test. Then of course this service has dependency, which is repository API. And inside this service, it calls this repository API. That's why we need to map this, because we don't care about we don't want to test the repo, we want to test this. But then again, this service has dependency on repos. That's why we are going to map that repository. Okay, because otherwise, if we don't map it, it will fail. But our concern is to test the service, not the repository. That's why we are going to map the repo to assume that it's working, right? Anyway, our main concern is to test the service. If there is some dependency like repo, we can simply map them and assume they are working. Okay, so here, as you can see here, the repo, this is the dependency about the service that we're going to test. We are going to return a dummy, which is this one. So that customer object in a list, we put it in a list. So basically, a list contain one record only. So whenever the service that we want to test call the repo, particularly the find all method, it will return this data, this dummy data. Okay, so let us test the service find all API. This is the one we're going to test here. This service has some dependency, which is this one. So inside this, it will call this. So we want to double confirm or verify that if when we call this service find all, it will return this data. Okay, that's why here result, this is the result. Okay, we filter it and make sure the message is equal to this value, this two value, ABC and test 1 2 3. That's why we have here the filter condition. Okay, of course then it will return one record. That's why we have count is equal to 1. So this condition should be true, otherwise it will fail. Let me run this. All right, okay, so we already test the service. As you can see here, the instance of this repo is Mac. See, Mockito. But this service, the instance of this is not Mac, it's actual. Alright, it's service, it's not Mac. Okay, then this annotation is equivalent to auto wired. But why we don't use the auto wired? Because auto wired, if we use the auto wired annotation, then we have to change this with Spring Boot test, which is very heavy, right? That's why as I said earlier, uh, as much as possible, we should always this extend with, because it's lighter than Spring Boot test. Okay, but then again, we have to pay the if we use this, we cannot use auto wired. Auto wired is applicable only if we use the add Spring Boot test annotation. I mean this. If we use this, then we can use the auto wired. If we don't use this, in this case, in our service, we don't use Spring Boot annotation, Spring Boot test annotation, right? That's why we use this at inject max instead of auto wired annotation. Okay, so the result, we are expecting whatever we insert here, right? So this whatever we return here should our service should return that same data. Okay, so if you have some logic here, you can consider adding some assertion here, but in this demo is very simple logic only. We basically pass the data here, then we in our service we verify if the same data we get the same data. Okay, so let me resume and double confirm it whether it pass or fail. All right, so it's pass. Okay, so I think that's all, guys. Thank you very much for watching this video. Let me wrap up. So in this demo, I'll show you how we learn basically how to do JUnit with Mockito, right? Again, in our POM XML, we need for JUnit, we only need this Spring Boot starter test. Then once you add this dependency, it will pull all the required libraries, JUnit libraries, one I said earlier. This one, Jupyter. It depends on the version of your Spring Boot. Okay, so basically it will pull all JUnit, Jupyter version, and the Mockito. All right, then since we in this demo also we test the controller with this one. We test our controller. So how there are two ways to test our control. We can either use Mock MVC and test less template. Okay, again, if you use Mock MVC, you need to use auto configure Mock MVC annotation. Okay, this is required if you're going to use this Mock MVC. Then for less template, this one, if you're going to use this, it's required to pass the web environment because we need the port and the host. This is the reason we need to use this. Okay, how to get the port, we need to use at local server port. All right, then for SQL, for our repository API, if you want to test whether our SQL query are working or not, we can simply use Spring Boot boot test annotation. Then this one at resource annotation is equivalent to at auto wired. Okay, all right, so here, as you can see here in my test case, I insert records using the save. This is the record I inserted. Then when we call this, it will insert to memory. Remember, our configuration is data source, this one, right, is in memory DB, the H2. So this one, the record will be inserted in our in-memory database. So it's okay to do like this, right? So it will save. After saving, it will pull all the records. So that's how we verify whether our SQL query or our JPA APIs are working or not. Okay. Then for service, again, as I said, it's important to, as much as possible, you use the extend with instead of Spring Boot test annotation, because this one is very heavy. It will load some resources, classes, and application properties That's why this one is very heavy. Is if we can, if we don't need to test the application properties and other classes, we can simply just use this instead of Spring Boot. Instead of using Spring Boot test annotation, we use extend with annotation. Okay. So again, if we use extend with annotation instead of using auto-wired or add resource annotation, we have to use inject max. Okay. Then of course, why we have this, why we map this object, because this service has a dependency to this repository API, and we do not want to test this. What we want to test is this, so we just map the dependency like this. Okay, so we can test the service. All right, so I think that's it, guys. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you guys enjoy this video. Until next time, peace.